Hi everyone, my name is A, and today I'm going to be discussing with you the findings of my research study, the Be a Juror Experiment. So unfortunately, I was having some technical issues with Zoom and the Screenomatic platform, so I'm just going to go ahead and flip my camera and go through the PowerPoint presentation with you on my computer screen, and hopefully it's easy to read. So again, this is the Be a Juror Experiment, and my name is A. So one of the questions that the study aims to answer is, does the type of eyewitness testimony impact a juror's rating of guilt? So the participants were assigned to one of three groups, either Group 1, no eyewitness, Group 2, an unrefuted eyewitness, or Group 3, a discredited eyewitness. The groups all read a similar statement about a hypothetical crime, and in reading the statement, each juror was then asked to provide a rating of guilt, ranging from 1, definitely not guilty, to 7, definitely guilty. I hypothesized that the ratings of guilt would be higher in the group with an unrefuted eyewitness versus either a discredited eyewitness or no eyewitness. So unfortunately, the data did not support my alternate hypotheses, and the findings actually showed that in all three conditions, the average rating was similar, ranging from anywhere between 4 and 5 on that 7-point scale. So just to give a brief introduction as to why I think this study and the findings from it are very valuable is obviously the practical implications of this study is that they have real-life consequences. These convictions could really ruin someone's life. New DNA evidence has led to exonerations of hundreds of individuals who had been wrongfully committed. And according to the Innocence Project, this was actually released in 2012, the races of the exonerees, out of 292 exonerees, 181 of them were African Americans, 85 were Caucasian, 21 were Latino, 2 were Asian American, and 4 whose race is unknown. At least 40% of eyewitness identifications involve cross-racial identifications. Race data currently only available to the victim, not from the victim eyewitness. And studies have shown that people are less able to recognize faces from different races of their own. And this was actually released, as I mentioned, in 2012. Since then, new data from the Innocence Project has showed that nationally 69% of DNA exonerations, a total of 367 cases, and out of those 367, 252 of those have involved eyewitness misidentification, and making it the leading contributing cause to wrongful convictions. So this is why this study aimed to highlight the impact that eyewitness testimony may have on a conviction of a crime. Because if a chance exists that an eyewitness may have been misinformed or is not recalling the events correctly, the ramifications could be, in some cases, deadly if the individual is getting charged with murder in a state where execution is legal. So it is quite astounding that this data has shown that many of the leading causes are misidentification of an eyewitness. So again, my hypothesis was that the rating of guilt would be higher in Group 2, the unrefuted eyewitness, in comparison to Group 3, the discredited eyewitness, or Group 1, no eyewitness. So the experiment. The participants and materials that were used, I'll briefly describe. The participants were between the ages of 18 to 60 years old. All were college students selected from 5 different schools in the 4 major regions in the United States, totaling 20 schools. So the total number of participants was 655. 478 of those were female, 163 were male, 4 identified as transgender, and 10 identified as a non-conforming to any specific gender. So all the data was collected from the American Psychological Association's online platform lab, and the materials that were needed were only access to a computer with internet capabilities. So a convenience sample was gathered from the online psychology lab platform. It randomly assigned the participants to one of 3 conditions. the independent variable, which were the conditions, would be either 1, no eyewitness, 2, unrefuted eyewitness, or 3, a discredited eyewitness. And the dependent variables were obviously the 7-point scale rating of guilt from 1, not guilty, to 7, definitely guilty. The data was then uploaded to the JASP software, where I conducted a one-way ANOVA test to get my findings. So the results. After removing 3 participants from not specifying an age and 11 for being under the age of 18, the total number of participants ended up being 655. So the reason why I sort of wanted to emphasize that the participants be over the age of 18 was obviously, in order to serve on a jury, you need to be 18 or over. And again, that my hypothesis was that condition 2, the unrefuted eyewitness, would be higher. But after reviewing the data, the p-value was greater than 0.05, and the ANOVA test showed that the F actually equaled 1.4, and the p-value actually equaled a 0.24. So significantly higher than that 0.05 that we would need in order to fail to, in order to reject the null. So one figure that I wanted to highlight was the frequency for age, because I thought it significant to sort of emphasize that this is a possible limitation, because having a large number of young participants does not necessarily represent the typical jury pool, which ranges in age, many of whom are could be on the older side of the age spectrum, specifically because they have the time to serve on a jury. So the mean average age for the participants was 21.82, so about 21, 22 years old, and the standard deviations for this participant was 4.97. So the total age range was the minimum, obviously, of 18, and the max number was 56. So another bit of information that I wanted to highlight was the table for descriptive statistics, which sort of described the dependent variables means, so the average rating, which, as I briefly mentioned in the abstract, the average ratings were anywhere between 4 and 5. So it's very interesting to kind of see how for group 1, obviously the no eyewitness, the average rating was 4.67. Group 2, the unrefuted eyewitness, the average rating was a 4.73. And group 3, the discredited eyewitness, was a 4.504. So as you can see, the data is all pretty similar in the range of the average rating of guilt. So the conditions did not necessarily have quite as much of an effect as I initially had thought in my hypotheses. So again, unfortunately, the data did not support my hypotheses, but it did provide some implications and considerations for future research. It was a convenient sample, which consists of primarily college students, and their prior knowledge and educational background about the errors in eyewitness testimony could have impacted how they viewed the information that was presented. Future research using the online platform should, one suggestion could be to limit the type of classes to only include introductory level psychology courses, which could be taken by pretty much anyone in the college level, not necessarily just specifically psychology majors, because several of the courses that I selected, for example, were experimental psychology or cognitive psychology, and of course in some of those courses the data is really looked at, and especially in cognitive psychology, factors like memory are explored. And other considerations could be to have the information presented in possibly a video format. Typically, when you're sitting in a jury in a courtroom, you don't necessarily just read all the information. You have witnesses that are sitting on the witness stand. You have a judge. You have the different attorneys, all the different people that are involved. So I think one piece of information that would be helpful is to kind of see it represented in a video format identical to the manner in which it would be presented in a courtroom. And I think that could have some implications for future research that might be beneficial to get some better findings. So these are just some additional resources and, where I got some of my data from. So again,
Thank you for listening, and hopefully you found some of this information valuable.